Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in this world, on another edition of WOWSA Live. I'm bringing to you from Mexico City, host Antonio Argüelles. Go ahead.
Muy buenos días, buenas tardes, buenas noches en cualquier lugar del mundo donde se encuentren. Es un placer desde la Ciudad de México presentar WOWSA Live. And today we have two very special guests with us, Bonnie Tsui and Kimberley Chambers. And the way to introduce them is I want to tell an anecdote that happened with Bonnie. I've been a reader of the New York Times probably for almost 40 years. And I always send my comments to the different articles that I find interesting. So when Bonnie's article came out a couple of weeks ago, I wrote her and I said, what a wonderful essay she had provided, and that I wanted to tell her that I'm an open water swimmer and that I'm coming out with the book shortly, and I go to bed. And then I wake up next morning and I have Bonnie's response and say, well, I know who you are. And not only do I know who you are in my book. And I said, oh, wow. And then we had all these friends in common, and that's how we met, Bonnie. So great to having you. And you are the connector, Kim. She told me that you were the one who told her this. The stories about Colibri swims and other swims in the Bay Area. So it's wonderful to have you both. And, I'll share. Why don't you start telling us, Bonnie, how you felt about swimming and these connections?
Oh, sure. I mean, it was just delightful to have all of these circles, overlapping, and especially in the open water swimming community. And so I feel like I have to do this. This is your book, Antonio. This is my book, Why We Swim, and we're meeting. And that Kim was the one who brought us together, because Kim is in Why We Swim, and she's such a big part of the book. And I feel so blessed to be all in this conversation together, because Why We Swim is a book that just came out a couple of weeks ago, and so I guess I'll give you a little bit of backstory. And it is a cultural and scientific exploration of our human relationship with water and with swimming. And there are 5 different ways of answering that question in the book, and all of the stories kind of fall into these themes. And first is survival, second is well-being, then community, competition, and flow. And Kim's really extraordinary story, anchors this the section of the book about well-being, because once we can swim for survival, swimming can be so much more. And Kim's story is about finding her way back to health and well-being and a new life, really, a rebirth in the water through swimming, and specifically open water, long distance marathon swimming. And so when in the course of learning about her story, swimming with her in San Francisco Bay, hearing all of her when we're swimming in the water at the Dolphin Club with Southland swimmers, and here it goes, woo, as we're swimming, it's just like, I feel like I'm back there now. And she had told me, about the Colibri Swim, the Cinco de Mayo swim that she did with you, Antonio, that was about, friendship and about, all of these terrible tragedies that happen at the border between our countries, but it was about these, it was a swim to bridge the gap, I guess. And so I knew about you, and that was to me, that was such an integral part of the story that Kim had shared with me, because, while she swam to a new life for herself, the swims eventually became something more than about her. It was about community, and that swim to me signified this next chapter of connection. And so that, and that really flows really beautifully into the community section of the book, which is about, I'm looking at all of these faces in this grid and this Zoom conversation. It's like, that's what it's about, like reaching out and touching everyone through water. And when we're in water, it connects us all.
Great. let's just tell me that Marielle Holle is also here with us, and Marielle was at that swim as well. She was with us, and Bonnie, before we turn the microphone to Kim, tell us a little bit about your relationship with swimming. When did you start swimming? How did you come to become so fascinated with swimming? In the book, you have a chapter telling how you and your brother did not want to go to soccer, and that you.
We're tired of getting our shins kicked in, and we wanted to go swimming instead.
So tell us a little bit about your swimming story.
Sure. Well, my parents met in a swimming pool in Hong Kong, so it was kind of predestined. My father's a lifeguard, and my mom was swimming at the pool, and so they fell in love. And my brother and I grew up swimming in New York, Long Island, Jones Beach, and then on the swim team, and became lifeguards ourselves. And so I competed for 10 years as a youth, like with club swimming. And then, just kind of took off from there, where in my sort of 20s, I kind of started to explore open water swimming and swam, did the Argüelles swim, and was just feeling it out, but also understanding that over that arc of time, that swimming became something more for me, right? It was about swimming through a lot of complicated, hard times in my life, from my parents' divorce, my family breaking up, having 2 kids. I swam right up until the day both of my sons were born, and I swam through a miscarriage and, deaths of friends and family. And I just thought that there was something to be explored about all of these threads that kind of weave together in the book. And, of course, when I met Kim, I just thought, she's a person who embodies this with such grace, and just, you're an amazing person, Kim. And I just feel like when I see your face, I get a little teary because I haven't seen you in so long. So, she's a real big part of this book. And so I wanted to have her talk about that too.
So Kim, you don't like the microphone and you're shy of it. But
you're afraid to hand it over to me.
That's why.
How much time have you got?
I know. Yeah. So go for a little bit. Just go for a couple of laps.
Yeah. First of all, you can swim and talk at the same time. That is a fact. So.
We've experienced that.
Yeah. Well, no. I mean, in all seriousness, I'm delighted to be here, and Bonnie, you have such an eloquent way with words, and we shared a lot in those days as you were working towards your book. And just to sort of echo what you shared about community and sort of why we are all here together today, and also a big part of WOWSA, that this fabulous organization that brings us all together, is community. And that's what I love about open water swimming, and the fact that water is this great equalizer. And that's why it was such a special way to sort of bridge a friendship that already existed between the US and Mexico with the swim that we did. And community has been a big part of my story. I'm the first to say that I share all of my achievements with everyone who believed in me. And I think that's, the community spirit in open water is something really, really special, because for us, we're marathon open water swimmers. So we don't get to stand on a podium. We don't get cash prizes. And we're not sort of, beating away other swimmers. You are the only swimmer in the water. And it is just competing with your mind. And so I think we're all in it for different reasons. And that's what makes the fabric of this community so rich. And I feel really humbled to be a part of it. Well, there we go. This was the start. This was the start of the Colibri Swim. So we were swimming from the US to Mexico in support of the Colibri Center for Human Rights. And there we are, a wonderful international team. Wow, this brings back some really lovely memories. We're about to get in the water, right, Antonio? Marielle's here on the line.
Yes, we were about to get into the water, and we had a complicated day. We never thought it was going to be, I thought it was going to be a nice swim. I had been swimming earlier because I was preparing for my last swim. This is on my way to finishing the Oceans Seven, and the water was cold. I mean, we weren't expecting cold water, and we weren't expecting so many waves, and here we are, and it was a wonderful experience. I don't know, Mariel, if you want to say something.
Let me jump in here. This is Steve. I just want to paint the picture of where this is. This is the pier in Imperial Beach, right north of the U.S.-Mexican border. And the swimmers would swim around the pier in approximately 8 kilometers, crossing the U.S.-Mexican border and finishing in Tijuana. And here you have South Africans, you have a Kiwi, you have Mexicans, you have Americans, and they really came together in this fantastic aquatic celebration of community and equality. So I just wanted to paint that picture where you guys are and where you're heading.
So Tom Hecker is here as well. He was one of the people who were doing the paddling, and what was really interesting, and I don't know if you remember, Mariel and Kim, is that we never thought, I would say going into the water, it's always easy, but getting out, it's really complicated. So why don't you take us through that getting out of the water, Kim? I mean, I'm sure you remember it. It's not in Bonnie's book. It's not in Bonnie's book.
Well, thank you for reminding me publicly, Antonio. I'll remember this. So for those in the audience that are sort of don't know too much about marathon open water swimming, for the most part, you are this is a group swim. So, and we have wetsuiters and non-wetsuiters alike. That was because the purpose of this swim really was the statement of friendship and using the water to provide a voice to community and friendship and kinship between the two countries. But nothing ever ends up the way you think it might end up, and you hope for good conditions. Getting in the water was a little bit rough. I don't know, for those of you listening, there might be keen surfers. I'm not a surfer, and we encountered some big waves, and you're always at the mercy of Mother Nature, which makes this sport even more enticing, because you train for these swims in various ways, whether it's doing laps in a pool or in a body of water that's near where you live. But you are always at the mercy of Mother Nature, and you get what you get. So we had swum to Mexico, as you do. I like to be able to say that.
You just like to say that. You just like to stop talking. Pretty bad.
And it was just this wonderful camaraderie. We're all together, and Tom Hecker, who was one of our paddlers. You can't do these swims without your escort boat, your paddlers. They're very much a key part of the swim. It's not just the swimmers. But we arrived at our destination in Mexico, and we had to exit the water. You're cold, you're eager to get out of the water, and we were greeted by hundreds of school kids, which I will never forget that moment. But I think I was squeezing Antonio's hand and Dan Simonelli's hand simultaneously, because I was quite afraid of these big waves. It was not an elegant exit. And with these
definitely not elegant.
You want to kind of like float out of the water like Aphrodite, but you like,
right.
Right.
This is not a glamour sport. You don't sort of get out and the way that you might wish. And even though the thought crosses your mind, you can't really stay in the water and turn around and go back. So you have to get out of the water. But I did see my life cross, in my mind a few times. So thank you, Antonio, for bringing back that wonderful memory.
Steven, do you want to come in? Jump in?
Yes, I do. I want to get to the point about meditation or thought in swimming.
Mm.
Quite often in our sport, we are either in a pool and we see this black line and we go back and forth 25 yards or 50 meters, or we're in an ocean, lake, or river, and you are totally within yourself. Kim, yes, we can speak, we can raise up our head and talk to our crew or our fellow swimmers, but really the whole experience is within our own brain. And when you have such an eloquent speaker as you two, and wonderful writers as you are, can you sort of go through the different thought processes that go through your mind? I mean, sometimes, I know in my case, I'll swim in a patch of cold water and I've got this fight or flight response. And then other times I could be in a tropical area, and what I think is 5 minutes turns out to be 50 minutes. Sometimes what I think 50-minute swim has only been 5 minutes. I never understand I just know that there's a tremendous amount of activity in my brain. I can't explain it well, and I'd like to hear from both of you. Like, what are those thoughts, impressions, ideas that cross your mind when we're in the water?
Well, there's a section I really wanted to get at that within this book, and there's a section of the book called Flow, and it's the last section of the book because I think so many of us wonder that question about that, Steven, and we don't really examine it very closely. But one of the things that I think is so special about swimming is that you really are alone with yourself, your thoughts, and your basically you're keeping company with yourself for a significant amount of time. And so you can't help but start to, your mind is drifting to all kinds of places. It could be memories, or it could be something very acute sensorially, like you said, what's coming through the cold patch. It brings you back into the present moment in a way that I think is so essential to what swimming is about, where like you can have both this experience of like being very present in the moment of what the water feels like, tastes like, sounds like, right? So like we know that the open water, ocean sounds, water sounds, they stimulate our brain activity to produce more alpha waves, and so that those are the brain waves that are more associated with relaxation and calm and creativity. And so our brains are all over the place, but in really good ways, making a lot of connections that are really beneficial to us. And then I think with the physicality of the water on you, you're very, very much in a different medium. You're literally out of your element, and it is a thing that you can't help but have your attention be called to in a way that's very special, because you're not in this all the rest of your life. You're only in it for the time that you're experiencing it as a swimmer. And then you're on land and you're just going about your day, doing all the things you're accustomed to doing. But when you get in the water, it's a conscious act, right? It's a conscious act of it's a practice I think that many of us can all really relate to as something that we need on some very basic level. And when we examine it, what it does to our minds and what we think about, and I think that sort of unpacks a lot of the science is starting to catch up in a really interesting way. So that's something that I really addressed in the book because I was curious about it too.
Right, great. And Kim?
Yeah, no, I think flow is really a big part of these journeys, as I call them, when you're out there in the water. As humans, we're ill-equipped to be in that space. As Bonnie said, we're land animals, and we are really guests in this environment. And as I said before, we really are at the mercy of Mother Nature. But you are competing with yourself. As I said before, you're not in a race with 100 other swimmers. It's just you and your support group, whether that's a support boat and a kayak next to you. Lots of people think about different things. I find it difficult to sort of settle into that flow state. It takes me, and it's strange to say, sort of 3 or 4 hours before you truly relax, because once every time I would get in the water, you've got the adrenaline surging and you're sort of questioning your sanity. You're like, okay, well, I really am jumping off a boat in the middle of the ocean in the middle of the night. This is perfectly normal. So you have that, and once you get in the water, it's sort of this dance with the boat next to you, because you can't touch the boat. So there are very, very strict rules that govern open water swimming. And one of them is that you cannot touch the boat or your support crew, or else you're disqualified. So, you know, and you might get sort of some rough water to begin with. And so you're sort of, the boat's sort of moving towards you, sort of moving away. So it's this sort of choreography that you have to sort of settle into. And then, of course, your crew is just as nervous as you are and eager to sort of get the show on the road. And to sustain ourselves through these swims, we have what are called feedings. And it sounds like you're a zoo animal, right? So you're sort of throwing a drink bottle on a rope, because again, you can't touch the boat or anything. And you have a viscous supplement. So you can't chew and swim at the same time. So it has to be liquid. And so depending on who you are as a swimmer, it's every 30 minutes or every hour. It's like putting a little log on your fire just to keep that little furnace going. So your flow state is, once you sort of reach that point where you're truly relaxed, it's only broken by these interruptions, I guess, of feedings, which are essential. But as Steve said, you can be out there, hours can pass and you have no sense of time. Some, you know, swimmers count, some swimmers sing. I like to think of my crew as sort of this entertainment box, kind of like a sitcom. And it's sort of like, okay, you know, entertain me, show me something. But I'll recount a recent memory of them, because you choose your crew so carefully. You want people who believe in you and people who, you know, support you and cheer you along. But there are other times when your mind interrupts you, and sometimes your mind will say, I'm getting cold. And then you're constantly having this conversation with yourself. No, I'm not cold. No, I'm not cold. I'm perfectly fine. So at times it can be a little maddening, but other times that flow state, once you sort of are able to really relax and feel comfortable that everything is going as according to plan, it's a dream state. You have no sense of time. It's a really beautiful place to be. I can say that there are some swims where there's a massive chunk of time I couldn't even tell you what happened. So it's a really interesting thing, and I haven't delved into the science myself too much, but I'm curious to do that with Bonnie's book.
Also, Kim, you raised something up. We're land animals,
yes.
But yet when we are talking about swimming, we're talking about breathing, feeding.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't think basketball players think about breathing. I don't think golfers think about feeding. I mean, we're talking about really basic things: breathing, moving.
Yes.
I mean, floating. I mean, floating.
Surviving.
Yes.
The opposite of
Staying
floating
alive.
is not. You know, and so, but Bonnie, in that section of flow, and also just your life as a young competitive swimmer going forward, like, how does one become comfortable in the water? Kim mentioned, you know, hours on end are just lost. I mean, this is I think a beautiful thing. It's a mystical thing. But from your perspective, both of you, how does one, maybe they start swimming when they're 40. How does one get about not being fast, but being comfortable in the water?
I think it's once your body is so well practiced, well trained, you know, and specifically with open water, because that is a really different animal than pool swimming, that you still have that small part of your brain that's monitoring what's going on. I think you can never really turn that off when you're in the open water, specifically in the ocean. But once you are in that sort of autopilot, that's something that happens, and then that's when your mind is untethered. Like, once you have gotten yourself comfortable with all that you can prepare, all that you know, and Kim and I spent a lot of time talking about this, just like preparation. Like, you prepare, and then you do the swim, and then you let it all go. And it might take, like you said, 3 to 4 hours, which I can't. And for me, it's a smaller scale. It's like 5, 10, 15 minutes. It's not 3 to 4 hours, but that you have, you've gotten yourself to the point where then you allow yourself the understanding that you have prepared all that you can. and you can't control what's out there, but you know what to do in case it happens. And then, your support crew and everybody, and then you just sort of let it go. And then that's when your body knows what to do. And that's how I think your mind can kind of be free.
Got it. And Kim?
Yeah, I think you described that so well, Bonnie. And to your point, yeah, with open water swimming, I guess with anything that we're passionate about, whatever hobby it is that you have, everyone has to start somewhere, right? And when I joined the Dolphin Club, I wasn't a swimmer, but I was really, really curious about it, and it helped me through rehabbing a leg injury. A swimmer there named Laura Zavikian said to me, you always want to set yourself up for success. And so there's these little buoys in Aquatic Park along the beach there at this lovely cove here in San Francisco. And it's sort of swim to the first buoy and then come back. And then the next day, see if you can swim to the buoy beyond that and come back. I think that's a great lesson for all of us in everything, because everyone has to start off somewhere. Even the greatest athletes in the world, the basketball players, the football players, they all have to start somewhere. And, and setting yourself up for success, not trying to sort of go out there and prove something that you're not ready for. But like many things in life, we truly aren't in control. Right now we're going through a global pandemic of unprecedented scale. And, I think as humans, we live our lives believing that everything is somewhat predictable and that everything is guaranteed. And what I've learned through swimming in the open water is that nothing is guaranteed. I've learned to expect the unexpected. Something is always going to go wrong, and it's going to be what you least expect it to go wrong. And so I think that being able to, as Bonnie said, sort of let go, and you prepare as much as you can, and then that's when your mind truly becomes untethered, and it's this freedom of self.
Great.
Which is really
Steven,
mystical.
I want to take something you mentioned, Steven, and that it's and it has to do with survival. And I guess Kim has experienced it. But you, Bonnie, when I was talking to you earlier, the chapter on the human seal, I can't remember his name.
Good for Thorsten.
Yeah, that's why I don't remember. He survived. I mean, that story is it's a great way of really understanding what it is to swim for survival. And would you like to talk a little bit about it?
Sure. I mean, there's a reason I opened the book with this story, right? It's one that is so gripping. And it's a story that my husband told me one night over dinner, and it was years ago. And it was about this Icelandic fisherman, Gudlaugur Thorsten, who in 1984, his fishing vessel capsized off the coast of Iceland. And everyone died pretty quickly except for him, and he was the last one left, and had to swim 6 hours in 41-degree water to safety. And he made it out. And when they finally got him to the hospital, they could not discern his heartbeat and couldn't really pick up, the thermometer wouldn't pick up his body temperature, but he wasn't exhibiting any signs of hypothermia, and he was just a little bit dehydrated. And it turns out that in addition to being a great swimmer, he had this biological quirk that his body fat was more like a marine mammal, like a seal. It was 2 to 3 times normal human thickness. And so when it was more solid, it kept his core temperature stable. And so he was able to keep swimming and get to safety. And so to me, it was like this dovetailing of two, the fact that he was a really good swimmer, and the fact that he was, uniquely suited to survive those conditions. Without one or the other, he wouldn't have survived. But that, the story is so compelling, because to me, it was a sign that we're not so far as humans, we're not so far removed from the sea. And, you know, he became very famous the world over after having this incredible survival story and this tragedy that happened. And so he really wanted to publicize the need for self-deploying life rafts and all of the vessels, fishing vessels in the Icelandic fishing fleet, and was very active in that because he talked with this other crew, like if one of them made it out, they would tell them what happened. And so he said, you know, most of the time when something like this happens, no one's left to tell, but I was. And so he took that responsibility really seriously. And then he also, there's a swim every year that's in his honor. It's called Gudlugsund, and it's basically Good Look or Swim. And it's in its honor. It has happened every year since 1984 when that accident happened. And it is how people on his home island in Iceland and also beyond honor his what happened to him, what he was able to do. And it helps to publicize, you know, the need for swimming education. And in Iceland, of course, it's mandatory, and all school kids know how to swim, and it's part of public education. And it's something that I think, you know, in the course of researching the book, many countries have this, Japan, you know, the Netherlands, but we don't have it here. And to me, I think that would go a long way to reconciling a lot of the sort of racial gap legacy, you know, in this country in swimming education and access. And so for me, I think that is something that I really think is really important and want to talk about in this, you know, in the course of talking about this book, because it's something that everyone should be able to do and everyone should have access to because of all of the reasons we talked about today.
Kim.
Well, let me jump in here and ask one more question. We all know that actually Antonio fancies himself as a pirate. And personally, I am not a pirate, but every time I get to the shoreline, I am looking forward to an adventure. You know, I actually, God, what would happen if I did see a shark? What would happen if I did get stung in my mouth? You know, what would happen if a huge wave came up? Those things don't happen, but in my own sort of twisted way, I go, God, what would happen? And for both of you, I'd like you to say, like, especially Kim, I mean, you're swimming in the Red Triangle, or you swam in the Red Triangle several times, the place where great white sharks just live, breed, and eat. And Bonnie, from your perspective about that aspect of survival, and Kim, from willingly going to swim with great white sharks, like what goes through people's mind when either they can't see the bottom or they do see the bottom? If they do see a shark or not see a shark, what is that mental process that people go through?
I think Kim should answer this one first.
Thanks. I'll try my best. Yes, I have swum out at the Farallones a number of times. So the Farallon Islands are 30 miles off the coast of California here, off the coast of San Francisco. And I sort of think of them as the California Galapagos Islands. It's teeming with marine life, you know, seals, sea lions, everything that would appear on the menu of a great white shark, basically. And they like to frequent there too. But what was important for me and a number of my swims that I've done is paying deference to that space. So I firmly believe that as a human being, I am just a guest. It's their living room. When I was about to do my swim, my solo swim from the Farallones, there was something going around on social media that said, if someone came into my living room in the middle of the night wearing just a Speedo, I'd probably kill him too. That's some open water humor. But I felt like I'd paid deference to that space. The times when I would go out there with night train swimmers, this is a non-profit that I'm part of, we swim around the world raising money for charity. You sort of drop in this water and it's, you know, it's crystal clear on the most beautiful of days. but you'd have all these seals and sea lions popping up to say hello, and I don't think any of them had seen a human being, and they were so, at times, so close that you could see their eyelashes, and they're just sort of looking at you like, what is this in my swimming pool? And you can sort of imagine, I don't know, swimming for me has sort of tapped into this childlike, I guess, like a 12-year-old Taylor Swift fan, I guess, is a way to describe how I approach these animals. And they get so close to me, and I'd use my same puppy, kitten, baby voice to talk to them, and I just go hi, and they sort of just look at you. And so there was this curiosity that sort of put my mind at ease, and really that those animals knew I wasn't a threat. I'm sure they weren't quite sure what I was, but when it came down to actually getting in the water for my solo swim, you know, I'm embarking on a 30-mile swim, and I jumped in at those islands, you know, around 11:15 midnight on a Friday night, and people ask, you know, why do you start at night? You know, that's so scary. It's terrifying. And I'm the first to say that. I have a very healthy respect for that marine life, but these swims are timed based on your speed and approaching your destination, so that when I was approaching the sort of the finish line, if you will, which was the Golden Gate Bridge, the swim was timed so that I would hopefully be encountering it on an incoming flood, so that the water would be assisting me to finish and not, you know, pushing me back. You hear these stories of people getting so close to France, swimming across the English Channel, and that ebb kicks in, and you know, you're either going to tread water for 6 hours or try another time. But so you get in at night, and I don't know, it's just this very primal experience. And I was gifted with a safe passage through that water. You know, I am a Kiwi, so now that I've survived that, I like to quip that I'm not on their menu. I'm foreign meat. So I got lucky. But you know, and they are part of this ecosystem. And again, we are privileged to be able to spend time in that water. But of course, it doesn't mean that you're not afraid. I was always afraid. But with any sport, I guess you get locked into a goal. And that can be a little intoxicating, to be honest.
Mm.
Bonnie?
Yeah. I mean, I talked about this a little bit earlier, but you know, every time I get in the water at Ocean Beach or in Bolinas, I'm always, and this morning I was telling you guys that I got up at 4:30 so I could surf before spending time with you lovely people. And so every time I paddle out at Ocean Beach, I mean, I am always respecting and fully aware who is in control. It's not me. And it is that I have prepared. I'm not going to make stupid decisions. I know that there is marine life out there. Of course there is, but that is a risk assessment that we all make when we do anything, really. And I'm not, you know, you asked about sharks and all that. I'm not a person who is particularly, even though I swim and surf in waters where their sharks live, I'm not particularly concerned about it because I know the risk is low. I also know that perception of risk is a different thing for a lot of people. But I sort of intellectually, I logically understand that the risk is very low and lower than for many of the things that we do in life, in everyday life. But that doesn't mean that I'm not afraid and that I don't recognize that. And when I'm swimming and my hand hits a patch of seaweed, oh hell, I am like, you know, rear up. It's something. And Steve, I think that you were looking at this earlier when you asked the question. It's like you can't stop yourself. Your body reacts instinctively, and you spring up, even though you're pretty sure your brain actually hasn't caught up yet, because your body is reacting so quickly, instinctively, viscerally to a thing that you have touched in the water and you don't know what it is, and you're just fight or flight in that moment. And then your brain says, okay, I recognize this thing. It's seaweed. It's not a threat. But you still can't stop yourself from doing it. And so I think obviously on some very cellular level, we know that there is a lot to fear in open water. And certainly I have that very much in my brain and body when I go out there. I don't forget, I guess.
Yeah.
And both of you have, I mean, Bonnie, your book is just wildly popular. It's had great acclaim. Kim, you've done the Fairlawns, you've done the Oceans 7, but as humans always seeking adventure, perfection, achievement, what's next for both of you? I mean, you're at the top. How do you go higher? And what are your plans? Bonnie, I know you're writing another book, I believe.
Yes, I'm writing another book. Actually, I have, people always ask writers when they have a book come out, so what's your next book? Yeah. And usually it's a horrible and paralyzing question, but I've learned a few things over the years, and I have 2 book projects already in the pipeline. The next book is this children's book that's coming out next year. It's called Sarah and the Big Wave, and it's about the first woman to surf Mavericks, Sarah Gerhardt.
Oh, awesome.
Mavericks is a huge wave here in Northern California, for those of you who don't know. And so it's a children's book that's coming out about that. I'm really excited about it. So it's kind of, along this watery theme. But I'm also writing, I'm working on a new book on fallow time, which is, I wrote an essay about it this past summer that talked about what I call fallow time, which is this time that we often don't give ourselves to act. I think of it as an active rest. So that we need things and activities and time to restore ourselves for all of the things that we do in the world. And that can look like different things for a lot of people. For a lot of us, it looks like swimming. And it is ironic that now that I am setting out to write this book, we are all in a forced period of fallow time. And so I'm actually really looking forward to probing and interviewing people who are so accustomed to like being like pedal to the metal. Kim, you're one of those people. Just like, you feel you're just, I think in our modern life, we're always going and there's so much stimulation, and there's a pressure to feel very productive and demonstrate your productivity all the time. And now I think for a lot of people what does productivity look like? That's different now. And some people are learning to embrace that. Some people also feel very uncomfortable with it. And so I think it's a really interesting and intriguing time to interrogate that. So I'm looking forward to doing that.
Got it. And Kim?
That's so exciting to hear that you've got some more books in the pipeline, Bonnie. I'm also attempting to write my first book. I've had some stops and starts in the last couple of years, but I'm hoping to have it ready for publishing next year. It's a memoir, and so it's been a wonderful thing to drop into during this time of there's a lot of uncertainty sort of around us, and it's nice to sort of drop into a bubble of memories. And sort of, because for me, when I was sort of doing these swims, I found a little trick, which was to, once I'd completed one big swim, essentially throw that fitness into training for the next swim. So I was sort of like a hamster on a wheel. And it does get intoxicating, because you're like, well, if I can swim from there to there, maybe I can swim from there to there. And then you're like, well, there to there. And so at what point does that stop? But I don't think I really took the time, and after each swim, I sort of wrote about my own sort of feelings and experiences. And I'm really glad I did, because there's so much you forget, that sort of raw emotion. But I don't think along the way that I really paused and took that time and sort of to what Bonnie's going to be writing about. We're sort of, so some of us are sort of, you sort of let these hamsters on a wheel, and it's nice to be able to sit back and, I don't know, just sort of put your feet up and reflect on what you've done and how that changes you. Because for each of my swims, they were personal journeys. I got to grow as an individual and really discover what I was made of. So for me, they weren't about, being the first to swim from the Farallons. It was about doing something I didn't think I could do. And I think we all have that within us. And it doesn't mean that you have to swim through a treacherous body of water. It's just about trying something you didn't think you could do. And so it's been a wonderful project for me to really, and just so much gratitude towards all the people that helped me along the way. So, and I've learned that writer's block is an actual condition. I'm not really a writer, but since I am writing a book, I could have writer's block. So,
Steven, I have a question for you, Bonnie, and maybe that would help you, Kim, with your book. When I think about the end, the Forever Swim, there were 3 moments that were key for me. One is when I decided to start doing it. So my first question is, when did you decide, Bonnie, Kim, that you wanted to write the book? Second, and you experienced this, Bonnie, and you will experience it, Kim, is how it's not only writing, but it's also the design, the feeling, how you want, all that process to me was really fascinating. And the third one is, you have 17 chapters in your book, Bonnie, and I have my share. There's always one. There's some scenes that you really love. I mean, that you I have to admit that I go back to some scenes that I just want to read them again and see if it feels the same as when I did it the first time. So can you tell us about those 3 things, Bonnie?
Sure. I think choosing to write the book, having written books before, I knew that if I was going to do a book again, it had to be something that I couldn't not do, or that I was going to do anyway, because I felt the need to do it. And so I sat with that for a couple years, just thinking about if I was going to do a book about swimming, what it would look like, and collecting stories. And then it kind of became clear that was what I did want to do it, and because I couldn't stop thinking about it. I would think about it and play with it in my mind, on vacation, or just when I was just lying around, just that I felt that it was something that kept tickling my brain. And so that's sort of why I decided to do it. I think in terms of like the larger question of all the different aspects of it, like reporting it, the structure, design, all that. I mean, like I'm really lucky that I had such a beautiful book designer, cover designer. I just love the cover of the book. I just feel like, I kind of want to get into it. And yeah, it's just like, it's so pretty, but like I said, I could get into yours too, except that yours is scarier than mine. This guy is very calm. Yours is wild. But that all of the aspects to me were so fun and such a joy. And I think it is very satisfying to have this complete work be done in something that you can hold in your hand and get hands to the world. And it's just really, I feel really lucky to be able to do that for a living. Yeah. I can't remember what the last one. Oh, my favorite scenes. Oh, geez. Maybe Kim should start talking while I look at the table of contents.
Okay. Sure. Well, yeah, I mean, I didn't set out to write a book. I don't consider myself a writer, but when I was doing these swims, what I would do is in the few days, recovering from a swim, sometimes my arms didn't work, and sometimes you're in varying states of convalescence. But it started out with me just trying to capture what I'd experienced, because still to this day, I have a hard time wrapping my little brain around these experiences, because they are otherworldly for all of us as marathon water swimmers. No one swimmer is better than the other, but we each derive different lessons and different experiences from that. So it just started out with me writing, and the days of social media, just sharing it on social media, and I had a blog, and then someone approached me and said that this could make a nice book. but it is a daunting experience. But I do like a challenge, so that's that. But putting it together, I'm still, you know, trying to figure out the actual structure. But each swim for me, I've chosen a selection of swims that each sort of have a lesson that sort of percolates to the surface, and I'm trying to convey that to people who don't necessarily swim. And it's, so I don't really have a favorite chapter yet. There's still sort of bits and pieces all over the place. It's like a jigsaw puzzle, but soon, I hope. But I'm enjoying that sort of detachment from reality right now and dropping into it and reimagining myself out there in the water.
I like the picture of you kind of pin dropping into a pool of your memories and kind of sitting around and kind of, you know, taking them and reordering them and thinking about what they all mean. I think this is a really great time to explore those things, you know, because you have so much. And again, it's like the forced fallow, right? It's the forced time to actually think about what all those experiences meant to you.
And then also the experiences that you have, oh, thank you. And the experiences that you have that aren't related to those swims and how that shapes the narrative of your book. Right. Because we don't live in isolation of these swims. So hopefully I can have something that's compelling to read and will follow in your esteemed footsteps, Bonnie and Antonio.
And Bonnie, your favorite chapter or section?
Okay, so they're all my children. I can't pick a favorite, but I will talk about one that actually I've been thinking about lately, and it was with Kim when I first swam in the bay with no wetsuit on, and that was a big deal for me, right? So I do get cold pretty easily, but when I saw that Mimi, 80-year-old Mimi, was doing it every morning, she's, you know, we went to the Dolphin Club, and we would see Mimi walk down with her Speedo and just wave at us, and then just get in and start swimming. And I said, oh, if Mimi can do it, I should be able to do this. And I remember that day so vividly because I was afraid. I had been thinking about it for a long time, and Kim was just the perfect companion to kind of bring me in there. And so we had swum together a few times with me with the wetsuit, and I said, okay, I'm going to do it this time. And I remember standing there and then diving in, and it was like this ice fire all over my body. And then I'm thinking, like, this is unreal, because it felt very, I felt very acutely alive. And then it was fine. And then I just was swimming and swimming, and I said, Kim, I can go the next buoy. And she said, let's turn around and go back, because I don't want you to get after draft. And of course I did, but not until we got back into the shower at the Dolphin Club, where the after drop is when your core temperature continues to drop even after you've left the water. And so I'm like cranking the water in the shower to hot, and I'm just, cannot get warm. But it was really interesting because we had already talked about it. So I knew what to expect. And so I wasn't afraid. It was more that I was really intrigued by what my body was doing. And then finally we're in sauna with warm up. And then I remember that day I left the Dolphin Club and I walked to my office. So I walked from the north side of San Francisco. I walked for like an hour, maybe an hour and a half, and just noticed everything so vividly. Noticed the light, noticed the way, I was very keenly in the world. And I never forget that, because now when I walk along the Embarcadero in San Francisco, or do anything around the city, or I'm at the Golden Gate Bridge, same thing like with having swum from Alcatraz, is that I look at the water and I think I was there, I know what it feels like, and I just have a different perspective on life. And I think that is not an exaggeration to say that those experiences changed me in that way.
Wow.
Beautiful.
Nice. I could speak and learn from you women for hours, days, weeks on end, but I want to ask one more question before we call it a morning here, is what would you give, what advice, what guidance, what words would you share with young teenage girls as they look toward their future? What college do I go to? Where do I want to live? What do I want to do? Both of you, what would you share with those young girls?
Wow. I mean, I think try everything. I think for me, I actually have been thinking about this a lot recently because I thought about how a lot of young people, students, high school students, college students right now are just like frozen and, you know, they're in a suspended state of animation, and there's so much that they're supposed to be doing now and that they're missing it so acutely and feel like this is the time of their lives. And I think about it for myself. It was the time that I had that I was making choices in the world, like choosing and trying things, and that I feel like in some ways they're being robbed of it this time. And I know that this time will pass and there will be another side to this. We don't know what that will look like, but that that when it does pass, to be unafraid and open to everything. I think that is just the thing that has been so useful in governing my outlook on life. And now when I look back, I think that was a really valuable thing to learn how to do, and swimming was a really big part of that. And it's a really hard, it's hard right now. And I think that to understand that even though the world is temporarily close to us, it's not going to be like that forever.
Yeah, thank you. And Kim?
Yeah, and I think that's so well put, Bonnie. I think especially given now, to realize that this is temporary, what we're going through, and unfortunately life is not a straight line trajectory. There's lots of peaks and there's valleys too, and for me at least, I think when you're in those sort of deep valleys, as we'll all go through, that's when you really learn the most about you and about yourself. But in terms of just never let go of your curiosity and surround yourself with people who believe in you. You know, we live in a world with social media and people are able to comment on things. And, you know, I've encountered my fair share of naysayers, people who don't think you can do that or question what you're doing. But I think that means you're on the right path. I think always believe in yourself and surround yourself with people who believe in you, because the possibilities truly are limitless for each of us. And it's so easy to compare ourselves with others and think, well, I'm not as athletic as that person, I'm not as smart as that person, but we're all individuals and we all have a special, unique role in the world. And sometimes you have to wait until you're 40 to realize what that is, but it awaits for each of us. And a big part of my story has been community, and just creating this little bubble of people who believe in you, because within that you can really create magic. And there's a richness to these experiences when you can bring people along with you. So find who your cheerleaders are. They're out there.
Wow, thank you very much. On behalf of Antonio, myself, and the entire global open water swimming community, I want to thank you very much for your time today. Antonio, do you have any words?
No, just thank you. Muchas gracias, Bonnie. Muchas gracias, Kim.
Thank
hope
you.
to see you guys in San Francisco soon.
Yes.
Yes.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.